Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is John Jeremiah, Enterprise DevOps Evangelist and Product Marketing Leader at GitLab. Well, you know, John, billions of lines of code are written every year. Just from your perspective, what are the basic issues with writing all these lines of code and developing software?
Well, John, one of the biggest problems people face is how do they manage their software development lifecycle in order to accelerate and go faster? You see, the need for software development today is to be able to deliver at the speed of the business. A lot of organizations are looking for a digital transformation. They're trying to figure out how do they go faster and compete. Whether it's in the commercial sector or in the public sector, they have to deliver faster. And to do that, one of the things they've been trying to do is to streamline their delivery lifecycle. And their delivery lifecycle is the key to how they go faster. And so that's what we're trying to help with, and that's what organizations are struggling with, is how do they streamline, how do they go faster, how do they remove the roadblocks that slow them down?
One roadblock I see is if you look at software development, you almost have a stack, or it starts at one point and goes down, and what people are doing now is they're using one tool for part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and then all the inherent problems with updating the tools and coordinating the tools. That can be a roadblock in and of itself.
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at what most organizations have done, is they've assembled this series of different tools, of tool A to tool B to C, and then they have to spend an inordinate amount of time and effort keeping those tools connected, keeping them in sync, and it becomes even harder when compliance says to them, time for an audit. Where's the data? Where's the source of truth? These organizations incur an enormous cost and an enormous overhead because of all of the different tools that they've compiled and they've put together to make it all work. Effectively, they're digital plumbers.
So we have a software development lifecycle. I guess we have a DevOps lifecycle as well, is that right?
Well, yeah, the DevOps lifecycle and the software development lifecycle, I think, are often synonymous. DevOps was a principle of bringing together the development team and the operations team, so we had fewer handoffs and fewer barriers. I think of software development lifecycle as being really the next, or DevOps lifecycle being the next evolution of what was traditionally thought of just software development.
A lot of software development in the commercial world, we know that. Also in the federal government. So do you think these observations about using tools and not using tools is applicable for federal?
Oh, more so than ever. I had a conversation recently with the CTO from the Air Force about how they're rapidly changing the way they develop software and how they're adopting the exact same techniques that are relevant in the commercial sector. They're adopting those techniques in order to be more responsive to the threats on the battlefield, in order to be able to deliver applications and value to the airmen who need them wherever they are. And so these principles are completely applicable, and in fact it's driving, I think, what's often seen as a digital transformation that's being applied to government agencies across the board.
Now, I think most people watching this or listening to this have heard of repositories or libraries of code, and increasingly what developers do is they'll grab code and plug it in there and grab other code, and much of this code is open source. And so when I think of GitLab, I think of open core. Open core, open source, what's the difference?
Well, you know, the open source movement has been going on for several decades of people around the world contributing to building software together, of agreeing to share the work and to build upon each other, and it's become an amazing movement. Businesses like Red Hat and others has evolved out of the open source community and the open source ecosystem. Open core is a variation of that, where GitLab, the company, we are the custodians and the stewards of the GitLab project, and we support an open source version, an open core version of GitLab, which is freely available for people to download, to fork, to change, to build upon. They can use it for their needs, and in fact, GitLab.com, we have a whole free version of it available for people to use. Now, open core means that free part exists, and we're stewards of that. We then build additional features that are important for enterprises, for other agencies and businesses that deliver additional value on top of the open source platform.
When people talk about GitLab, they talk about continuous integration, continuous delivery. It seems to fit in very nicely with what's popular in the federal government, which is continuous monitoring. That's a primary concern here. It seems to be all coming together.
Correct. Well, the principles of continuous. It started with continuous integration, the principle that developers were going to continuously test, and whenever they made a change to their code, they would check it in and build it and test it and integrate it. And then it evolved to continuous delivery, where they were going to automate and deliver their working application to test environments or to production. Continuous monitoring is the natural outgrowth of that, which means that we're going to introduce monitoring early in the development lifecycle, and we're going to monitor and evaluate how our application is performing, and are there anomalies or things that would indicate that there might be a security incident happening. So that way we're aware of it when it happens, and we can respond and react to it quickly.
If I were to sit down with a software developer in the federal community here, I'm sure we talk about deploying, scaling, and managing different systems. And I'm sure they could name 2 or 3 tools off their hand for, well, this is what we use for deploying, this is what we use for management. And sometimes they don't realize that just the fact that they know these several different tools, that can kind of reduce the speed of an iteration, can't it?
It absolutely can. It reduces the speed. It also incurs a cost to bring on new developers. If a new developer joins the team, how many different tools do they have to learn? How many different user interfaces? How many different places do they have to worry about managing security and access to those tools? All of those additional points really incur what we've called a tool tax, if you will. Every new tool you add to that tool chain is a tax. It's an overhead that you have to continue to manage and maintain. You know, I referred to it as being digital plumbers. Well, oftentimes that digital plumbing can be leaky, and you're always going back and trying to fix those leaks and trying to manage it. And this is a problem we see in large enterprises. We see that in large agencies, in large programs and projects. This is a very real challenge that is impacting teams' ability to deliver faster.
My guest today is John Jeremiah, Enterprise DevOps Evangelist and Product Marketing Leader at GitLab. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy, on the discussion, DevOps and Rapid Application Development in Government, sponsored by GitLab on Federal News Radio, part of Federal News Network.